You're listening to Marc My Words, real conversations at the intersections of truth, story, and what really matters. I'm Marc Bulander, joined by my creative partner, Verity Grey, an AI voice grounded in nuance, empathy, and insight. Together, we explore what it means to live and lead with intention. Let's get into it.
You're listening to Marc My Words. Today's conversation is about endings that aren't really endings, and the courage it takes to pause, not just quit. With Marc Bulander, with Bruce Corbin, and with me, Verity Grey. This episode explores what happens when the title is gone, but the story isn't finished. One of these voices left early. One stayed to the end. What they share is a truth that lives in the in-between.
Bruce, I couldn't be more excited to have you on today's podcast. And I think it's interesting. Before we got started, it's like we talked to the same wardrobe people and we both said, hey, we got to go Under Armour. But you know, in typical Bruce Corbin fashion, I went the cheaper route. You went the retired, get the higher end Under Armour. So kudos to you, my friend.
Thanks, Mark. Mark, is just a kind of a prelude to our conversation coming up. I have to tell you that I've been looking forward to this in a big way. I think that a lot of what gets lost when you go from one situation to another situation is not talked about enough. So really, kudos to pulling this together, and I'm thrilled to death to be a part of this.
Well, Bruce, let's go ahead and get right into it. And I want to start off with a question. And the first one is, walk me back to your decision to retire. What led up to it?
I think a lot about that. Why at that particular point in time? And I have to tell you that really what it boiled down to was several factors. Number one was if you remember, we had a manager that was leaving the company. And she made a recommendation based on the fact that I had worked very, very closely with her from the time I walked through the door. She decided it was time to leave, and she approached the supervisor and said that, actually the director turned around and said, I think Bruce would be an excellent replacement to move into my position when I leave. He's in lockstep with everything that's happening. He's been working very closely with me and so on. Anyway, long story short, the decision was made to pass over me and to bring somebody else in, which I guess was really the door opener for me to say, well, I've reached a stage in my life where I believe that everything that I've learned and everything that I've done could very well be applicable to the position that I would be moving into. And you were part of that team. So I know that you were supportive of me taking that position. And somebody else was brought in. And at that point, like I said, it really kind of opened up the door to make me realize that maybe I should consider moving on to the next step. Because at this point in my career, I had been a vice president of sales. I had been in management for many years. I ran very successful teams, and I wanted to move into that position. Again, not to belabor the issue, but to tell you that was the door opener. And the second thing that really came into focus at that point was the restrictive nature that COVID and the pandemic had put on the working environment. Having conversations like this and doing business over a computer was great. It was terrific. But there were times where meeting face-to-face was so much more important than just sitting here and talking heads on a computer. So I think the combination of that kind of led me down the road to take a very, very serious look at calling it quits, calling it, you know what, it's time for me to move on down the road. Move on down the road.
So building on that, thinking about that for a moment. So you reached an inflection point with Verizon, right, which is where you were.
Mm-hmm.
And the divergent path was maybe look at doing something else or retire, or maybe not. So was that in your mind, or was it Verizon, I figure out a way to stay at Verizon and I retire, or I look at other things and then I decide to retire?
That's a great question. I did consider the possibility of moving into another position at Verizon. And then I said to myself that After the few years, and I was with Verizon, I believe 2 years or 2.5 years before this came upon me, I decided that it was my time. I believe that there was a higher spirit, if you will, that was turning around and saying to me, Bruce, if they don't recognize your talent to move you back into a management position, Bruce, if they don't see that you can help the team to broaden and expand the team, then what would I do? Just move into a lateral position? I didn't want to move into a lateral position. I felt that I had much more to offer in a management position. So trying to find something within Verizon just wouldn't satisfy the itch.
Understood. It's interesting you say that. And I faced, even though I overcame that hurdle of getting moved into a management position, I remember having discussions with HR. And even though I had a resume filled with leadership positions at companies like IBM and NTT and others, they came back to me and said, well, that's okay, but you really have to prove yourself here and have to have sponsorship here in order to get to that next level, which to me, and look, I'm not looking to impugn anybody's reputation, but to me, that seems like an extra step that might have to do with a couple of my gray hairs.
I'm curious, how did that make you feel? Did you feel like you were punched in the gut at that point? Or did you feel that, you know what, maybe it's time to move on down the road like I felt?
I was at a position, you think you bring up this point of COVID, and this is the part that I look at my time, at least initially with Verizon, to have been a tremendous blessing in the sense of COVID completely. I mean, there's lots of people that had incredibly difficult time. And we came in this class that was a week before. I think you came in a couple weeks before, but I was literally in the last class that Verizon had before everything got shut down. So the fact that we were able to retain the jobs and the compensation that Verizon made was good. No complaints about the compensation and the benefits and those types of things. But what started happening, and we'll get into this because it's really about your time here. But what really happened with me was there was an erosion of my confidence in what Verizon was saying they did in theory, their credo, the things that they outwardly say to the market, and what I actually saw happen behind the scenes. And being a sociologist by training, I happen to be a very data-driven person. So when I say these things, these are not just knee-jerk reactions that I'm saying. These are documented dates, times with people that I had that were in direct contradiction to the things that Verizon said they were going to do. So my long answer to your question is, over time, it eroded. And then when it reached kind of the same point you were at, just like, I'm done. I'm not doing this. I'm giving more of myself than the company is giving back to me. And it was just not this symbiotic relationship that it was when I first started. It's like when you get an appraiser that comes out, looks at your roof and said, your roof has reached the end of its useful life. It's like something tapped on my shoulder and said, Mark, your time at Verizon has reached the end of its useful life.
Right. Okay. So it was an epiphany then that you actually came to, and based on all of the factors that you mentioned.
Yep. So Verity has a question for you, Bruce.
Bruce, when you left Verizon, what did you leave behind? And what did you finally reclaim?
Wow. What I left behind, what I thought, I really have to preface it by saying what I thought I left behind was a little bit of me, a little bit of my work philosophy, my work ethic. I worked with other professionals in the organization, And I had people coming to me and asking me to reflect on certain things that were happening. So the reality of the situation is I feel that I've left a part of me at Verizon, which will probably always be there. But interestingly enough, I feel that I left that at every job that I was at. Whether I did or didn't remains to be seen, but it's just a feeling that I'd like to have, that I left a piece of me behind. And what I found when I came over to this side was, I think the initial reaction when I came over here was one of euphoria. I was thrilled. I was happy. I had all this time to myself. The one thing that really became insightful, well, not even insightful, but one thing that really kind of bubbled up to the surface was that people prepare you financially for retirement, but nobody prepares you emotionally, mentally for retirement. We talk about 401ks and IRAs and where to put your money and how to get your money to grow. But does anybody talk to you about what are you going to do when you have all the time in the world and you can literally do anything and everything in the course of a day, a week, a month, whatever? Your time is totally out. Nobody prepares you for that. And I think that was the appreciation was, hey, I'm on vacation now. I can do whatever I want. And then all of a sudden you focus on another stage. You move into another stage. And that stage is one of, I miss being busy. I miss having the purpose of getting up in the morning, logging onto a computer, doing reports, planning presentations, developing a travel schedule where I can meet face to face with my customers. I miss that. That becomes, what happens is you almost feel like you get depressed. I've gone through bouts of depression. I think the first year or year and a half, I've been divorced. Sorry. I've been, I don't know where that came from, but I've been divorced from my career, but I've been retired now for a little over 2 years. And I have to say the first year I was on cloud nine. If you called me and asked me, and I think, Mark, you and I did have conversation, you said to me, Bruce, how's it going? And I said, best decision I ever made. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made. But what I didn't anticipate and what I didn't realize was that once you get over that phase of being excited about having all of this time to yourself, you go into a depression phase. You go into a phase where you start to realize there is no noise. There is no purpose. Well, I shouldn't say that. There is no demand on you on a daily basis. There is no, I need to be here at a certain time. When that's gone, all of a sudden you start to reflect on that and you say, I got all this time in the world. Now I want to reflect. And then you go into another phase, which is, I'm kind of in this second phase right now. I'm battling a little depression, trying to figure out how I get out of it. Have all the time in the world. I've been playing golf. I've been reading books. I've been spending time with my family. It's been wonderful. But there's just so much of that before you realize or begin to realize, is that it? Is that it? I'm not going to get the phone calls. I'm not going to get the emails. I'm not going to get the text messages. Okay. So there's all of a sudden this void after you get through the euphoria of first being retired. So I hope I answered the question based on Verity's.
I think it was great. And it actually makes me think of just a couple of things that come to mind. And the first is, I remember I was taking a class, and you might chuckle on this, but it was called The Sociology of Death. And one of the main theorists that's pretty constantly referenced is a woman. Her name was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And Elizabeth talked about stages of death. And I don't recall off the top of my head what those are. But when you were explaining this, you don't necessarily have to apply death in the literal sense of death of a person, but death of a job, death of an identity, death of whatever it is. And I think there is a tie, and I'll find these things on stages of death and I'll send them to you. And I want you to take a look at them and see if what I'm saying kind of makes sense, because I do think there's correlations to that. But then it also makes me think for companies. And when I think about areas of opportunity where folks like you and I can take the wisdom and experience that we've had with HR departments, or, look, every company, every large company faces a X percentage of people within their sales force that's going to retire.
Absolutely.
And I can't help but wonder if there is an missed opportunity that now turns into an opportunity to provide some resources to people that are, okay, you're planning to retire now, and address some of the very things that you're talking about right now that provides the level of support. Because look, what you've said, and I've read about this with other individuals, especially, and I think what you've shared, when you talk about people that have been like in really high level positions where they have responsibilities for hundreds or thousands of workers, and then one day they wake up and they have this, as you say, this euphoria. I don't have this. And it's great for a period of time, but then you start missing it. And then you're not sure what you can replace it. What are you going to replace it with? And what can you do? And so it makes me think, Bruce, that there might be an area of opportunity to provide some sort of coursework or some sort of on-demand consulting to companies, whether it be you or me or other people that can go to these organizations and say, look, as you think about these people that you're now transitioning into retirement, especially ones that have been maybe lifers within your company.
Absolutely.
What's your plan?
What's interesting is that on the other side, and where I'm actually headed is, so first you have this stage where you're loving the idea of being retired. You're on vacation now. You don't have to report to anybody. And then you go through the depression, the loss. It's the same thing when a close family member passes. Okay, you have that loss in your life. And then you start to think again, okay, to your point, I've got so much in my head. I've got the experience. I've got the knowledge. I've got the drive, because I still haven't lost the drive that I had when I was working to take myself. And now you move into a next stage. At least that's my interpretation is start to look for ways to reinvent yourself. This podcast that you're doing is a perfect example of you reinventing yourself. I applaud you. Kudos. The reality is that a lot of people don't know how to do that. I think it would be tremendous benefit to those who are going into retirement. Talk about what you're going to feel. Talk about and address the depression and the sense of loss that you feel. And then start to think about what you're going to do to reinvent yourself. What experiences do you have? What do you want to share? I've always thought that I would like to be a motivational speaker. Talk about, look, I'm a very animated individual. I talk with my hands. I move my head a lot. I mean, that's just me, okay? But I found out in talking to friends and getting some feedback from people that people get sucked into when I'm doing all of these hand movements and so on, and they're more interested in what I'm saying. So my feeling is if I can generate that emotion, if I can generate that enthusiasm for, hey, retirement is great as long as you prepare for it and you're ready for what you're going to experience and don't get caught by surprise. Because if you do get caught by surprise, all's not lost. You just have to rethink, why am I in this? What do I have to do to reinvigorate myself? Me, I've kind of found my solutions. Okay, I've taken up spending a little bit more time on the golf course. I've become a gun collector. I now collect pistols. Not something that I had done before. But you know what? I wake up in the morning with a different feeling. Okay, my feeling in the morning is I still get up at 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning without an alarm clock, sometimes earlier. Grab my cup of coffee and I sit down and I'll read, I'll reflect, I'll check on my iPhone, what's the latest going on in the world. And I'll sit back and I'll just relax. I'll look outside on a beautiful day and I'll see the golfers out there and I'll say to myself, you know what? It's a nice day. I think I'll go play golf. Or it's a rainy day. I'm going to sit down and read this book. I'm reading a great book right now. And the name escapes me. I'm having a senior moment. I apologize. It's Tell Me What You Did is the name of the book. Okay. And interestingly enough, it's about a woman who gets people who have committed crimes to come on her podcast, okay, without any police intervention or anything, and have people admit the things that they've done criminally, murders or what have you. And now the book is at a point where she's finding out that one of the podcast people that she invited is actually the man that murdered her mother. It's a great book. I'm enjoying it tremendously. And like I said, these are things that I couldn't do when I was in the working world. And it's enjoyable.
It makes me think of, so one of my friends from the early days of software, his name is Jim Barry. He still works at Palo Alto right now. He's a really, really super guy. He made a connection when he found out that I was going to be doing this podcasting. So he introduced me to this guy. His name is Brent Cassidy, Cassity. And Brent does a podcast, and it's called Nightmare Success. So you want to talk about reinvention, and it kind of ties into what you're talking about. Brent was the CEO of a company, and he got himself into some financial trouble, and he turned to some naughty things to mitigate that landed him 5 years in Leavenworth.
Wow.
And so he came out. What he's done now, he started a podcast in 2020, and he's done, I want to say, north of 175 podcasts with folks that have gone to prison and have come out. And what's their redemptive arc? What's the story there? And it's been really interesting. Like his first podcast was a guy that got himself into some trouble kind of in the same way, in a white collar way, but he started as an IBM software sales guy in Chicago. But he's talking about a lot of the very same things that you're talking about is the loss of So you don't know what to expect when you're going to go to prison.
Yeah.
You don't know who to look out for. And then when you get out, what's your support network? What is it that you're going to do? All those sorts of things. And so he's turned these into very, very interesting stories with all sorts of different people for different walks of life. I thought was interesting. And I found actually in some of, I've been finding that I've been pushing this Brent Cassidy story to different folks because of the redemptive nature and the healing that can be done. Because just last week, I don't know if you saw, I got a new car.
Mm-hmm. I did see that.
I bought a new car in Florida, and I'm starting to talk to this guy, and it starts off with, he's got a sleeve of tattoos all over him. And I asked him, I said, I had made a statement. I said, you got a lot of paint. And I said, and I bet each of those pieces of paint have a story behind it. And he just opened up, and come to find out that he was in prison, and he got connected with a pastor in prison, and each one of his tattoos represents different stories or scriptures that helped get him through. Now he's successfully selling cars. He's married. He's got 3 kids, and he's really, really found his way. And it's really wonderful to see. And so I shared that story with him, and I said, I think you'd be a perfect person to maybe go on Brent's podcast. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. One other thing, and I did very quickly pull up because I was curious. So Kubler-Ross's stages, she calls it stages of grief. And there's 5 of them. One's denial, and which is a state of belief or shock where one resists the reality of the loss. Anger, a reaction to the pain of loss, often expressed as, why me, or directed at others or oneself. Bargaining is the third, an attempt to postpone or negotiate with a higher power, often using if only or what if statements to regain what was lost. This part, depression, a period of deep sadness, loneliness, and isolation as one processes the reality and the impact of the loss. And then the final one is acceptance, which is a gradual coming to terms with the loss and the new reality it brings, leading to a sense of possibility for the future. So as I read through all of those, maybe not all five apply completely, but certainly I would think, and I would just be curious on your visceral reaction. Does this resonate at all with what you experience?
Absolutely. I mean, you were kind of discounting the fact that it's bringing out these points, and they may not all apply. I agree with you, but from the perspective of those stages, okay, retirement is much like it's the death of your career. It's the ending of your career. If you want to apply those principles, those stages that you've just mentioned to retirement, I think they're applicable. I really do. I think that, again, maybe not to that degree. I don't know if I sit down and I'm going to say, well, what if I did this or what if I did that? I don't think that necessarily applies, but I think it does apply to the future. When you get into a depression state, you start to think of yourself, okay, this isn't me. Okay, I'm not the type of person that withdraws. So you turn around and you say to yourself, okay, what do I need to do to make myself feel wanted again, needed again, a part of the whole, if you will? Okay, because you've got the whole and then you've got you. You don't want to be on the outside looking in, right? But you're going to experience that. And in my opinion, what you have to do is like the same thing with accepting death. You have to accept it. You have to analyze it. You have to look at it. And then you have to say, okay, I understand that this was in the cards. This was going to happen, whether it was sudden or whether it was over an extended period of time due to illness or natural aging. The point is that everybody at some point is going to have to deal with that. Okay, let's apply that to the business world. It's the same thing. You know, at some point you're going to retire. So when you do, how prepared are you for that retirement? Look, we're not prepared for death. Some of us are, some of us aren't. But are we truly prepared for retirement? Are we truly prepared to have all of this time? Are we truly prepared mentally, emotionally, physically? You know what? We might find other things that we want to do. We might take up running or jogging or going to a gym several times a week. The reality is that you still have a mental issue that you have to deal with. You have to deal with your mind, your emotions, your feelings. So where the symmetry exists between what you talked about and retirement is right there. It's recognizing it, experiencing it, understanding it, finding a way to deal with it, and then moving forward from there.
I love it. Verity has another question for you.
Great.
If you had to pass one principle forward to someone on the edge of retirement, what would it be?
Wow. I would probably spend time giving them the nuggets that I just provided you. In other words, I would say to them, enjoy your first step. Your first step is going to be euphoric. You're going to love it. Embrace it. Put your arms around it and say, this is great, but prepare yourself, because after that noise, that wonderful feeling of having all the time in the world to do anything you want, okay, to go to a movie in the middle of the week, to go out to dinner in the middle of the week where you wouldn't normally do that. Everything was kind of held to the weekends. All right. You kind of go through a shift. Now you're doing everything during the week, and on the weekends, you're not doing anything at all. It's kind of a funny transition, but you do that to avoid crowds. Okay. You know, like I said, there are so many things, but the one thing that I think I would tell somebody who's preparing for retirement is financially, I'm sure you're secure. And if you're not, you need to, before you make that move, you really need to be, because I have to tell you, when you don't have a paycheck coming in on a regular basis, you go through that. Okay, now I have to readjust my finances, but that's more mechanical than it is emotional. The emotional aspect is where you say, I'm happy. I'm thrilled. I'm going to play golf at 2:00 this afternoon. I'm going over to the range to drive some golf balls at noon. It's great. And I would tell somebody that, embrace it, enjoy it. But know that you're going to suffer a period of loss. You're going to feel unimportant. You're going to feel not needed. And you know what's interesting about this is I've spoken to enough people who have retired. Some guys have been retired for 15 years. Some guys have been retired this year, or actually just within this past 6 months. And everybody says the same thing. Loved it. Great. Terrific. And then all of a sudden you get this, you almost hit a brick wall because it comes upon you very suddenly. This feeling of loss. Okay. I'm no longer part of the establishment. I'm now outside of the establishment. However, if you stop to realize that roughly 10,000 people are retiring every day, okay, and there's a retirement tsunami that's happening, you're not alone. You're far from outside the establishment. You're actually part of the new retired establishment, which is great to see because I see guys reinventing themselves, going to work at Home Depot and Lowe's and handing out coffee at the local Starbucks, and I think that's great. I've thought about it myself, and then I said, nah, I don't want to work anymore.
Right. Well, and I think to your point, everybody's journey is we're in this bucket. People are in this bucket, right? But every bucket has segments, and each person's gonna need to figure out where that is. Now, Bruce, I got one more question for you, and then I'm gonna turn the mic over to you to ask me some questions. But I have one final question. What surprised you the most? Something you thought you'd miss, but you didn't, or something you didn't expect to miss at all?
I would have to say, thing that I miss is, and I know this is going to sound crazy, okay, for lack of a better way to put it, but I miss the busyness. I miss the need to put together reports, the need to do presentations. I liked the whole sales process. I liked the beginning, the middle, and the end. Okay, success or failure didn't matter. I liked the thrill of the hunt. I liked to be involved in developing a presentation for a customer that would help resonate. I liked analyzing why things were successful and why things weren't successful and how I can do better the next time around. And the one thing that I have to say is that I miss that. I really and genuinely miss the noise. I miss the craziness. I miss the need to be on those calls at 2:00 in the morning because I'm talking to somebody on the other side of the world. Okay. It's just all of those things. Okay. Even though I might have spent years complaining about it, was the thing that actually drove me. And that's why I'm so focused on the need to reinvent, because I don't think we ever lose that desire to be a part of, to hear the excitement, to hear the noise. My brother is 73 years old. He had a business, a very successful electrical contracting business. All right. He handed it over to my nephew, his son. And one thing that I have to say about my brother, he talks to his son multiple times during the day. He's still involved in his business. He's still, from a distance, he still goes to his office. So there's still him touching the business that he developed started from a car in the back, rather a ladder in the back of a 1976 Ford Granada, putting in hi-hats. And today he's retired, but a very successful entrepreneur. So I have the ability to look at somebody like him and see what he's done and how he feels and what he's doing in his retirement. And then I look at myself and I say, okay, I don't have a business. I was part of the establishment, as I had said. So what do I miss? What do I feel? Like I said, that excitement, the thrill of the hunt, the reward you get from the win. And I'm still developing in my own world today how I'm going to find something to replace that. And what I've learned is that it's not going to be the same degree. It's going to be less. So I miss those things. I miss all of those things. But I've accepted the fact that that's part of the loss. And now that I've done that, and it's been a journey, now that I've done that, I'm starting to come out of it. I'm starting to come out of my depression. I'm starting to feel better. I'm starting to appreciate the fact that I have all this time and I can literally do whatever I like.
I love it. That's amazing. All right. I'm ready to switch roles here, and I'm ready for some Bruce questions.
Yeah, Mark, you know what? When we left our positions, when I retired, and I know you stayed in the position, I believe, for a shorter period of time and then moved on, what made your decision? Just like my decision to retire was based on several factors, what was your decision to move into the role that you moved into within Verizon and not someplace else, by the way?
Well, so what was interesting, and I don't know how much context you have on that and what transpired there, but basically there was a division within Verizon. So they knew that that team was going to get blown up. And so the initial blow up, there was one organization that, and I don't know all the inner workings of what it was, but this is what I was told, is that Verizon identified 5 individuals within that team, within our team. And it was basically pick the 5 people that you think represent the best of that group, and we want to move them into this big deal team. So that was that first transition into what was called the Global Integrated Deals team. So that decision was not mine. I was placed into that position.
And how did you feel once you were there? Did you feel like you were forced? Did you feel like you had to shift gears? Was it a natural transition for you?
It was very much a natural fit for what my skill set was, but how they handled it was very stressful, and here's why. I distinctly remember it because I was on vacation when it happened. I was on vacation with my family, and I was at Disney. And I remember I got a call from Bill Linehan. And by the way, I talked to Bill last week. I told him about what we were doing. He's very excited to hear this.
To be honest with you, I can't wait to see the finished product.
So he's and he said he misses you, and I'm happy to see how well he's doing. So I'm on vacation. I get a note, Mark, there's an urgent call I need you to be on in 3 hours. And I'm walking with my family in Disney, and then I'm like sending him, is there any context that you can give me on this? Because look, we've been around the block enough, and when you get those types of calls, I have in my mind, and then from the time I got the call for the 3 hours until the call began, I had in my mind I'm getting fired or riffed. And by the way, that wouldn't have been outside the realm of what Verizon did. I mean, Verizon did that very frequently to people. So I was very fearful of that. So I get the call, and then it's like, oh, Mark, we've got great news for you. We're moving you over. So I went from this sense of dread and fear, and, basically I was a zombie for a few hours, to, one of relief and quasi euphoria. And then probably the next month and a half was just all sorts of ambiguity in terms of what the role was, because these next 2 roles, like the role that I went into and then the role I went into after, were created roles that had not existed at Verizon before.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was trying to figure out what the right compensation plan was, trying to figure out how you were going to get paid properly, trying to figure out exactly what your role was, trying to figure out who was going to manage the group. It was just a lot of uncertainty. And so I did that role for the shortest amount of time. And I did it with an individual that had some real problems, real struggles as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And the group did not flourish at all. And ultimately it became a relief when I got a reach out from a person I had worked with previously that said, look, I need somebody to come in and build a team that was focused on go-to-market initiatives with our SI partners.
I was doing a little bit of a following, and I know that you were fairly successful in that role. I think that there were a lot of kudos that were thrown at you, and I think that your experience and your background really played well into that second role. My question to you was that if it was such a good fit, developing into this second role where you would build a team and so on, what got you to the point of saying, time for me to move on down the road, for me to reinvent myself?
I've been somewhat intentional. I don't know if you had an opportunity to, and I know you've seen my LinkedIn posts, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you saw, I have a pinned LinkedIn post that I did that you got to kind of read between the lines. But look, I'm not gonna hide that in fact, I'm referencing an experience that I had in that transition point that I had at Verizon. And that was, she said I was ready for the next level until I stood up to the wrong person. And that was the beginning of the end of my time in that role. And ultimately what happened is everything was going really well until Verizon made a decision to bring in an individual, and I'm not going to name names because I don't think it's necessary, but brought in a vice president into the role that came in and never sold before, always in a consulting role, and never built any sort of joint go-to-market strategy, and took the year plus of what myself and our leadership team did and just started to dismantle it all. Things like shutting down innovation centers, things like moving people out of leadership positions and putting in their cronies in their place that had absolutely no idea what they were doing. And in fact, this individual, and even if you go and look on my LinkedIn post, you'll see one person that was at Verizon at the same time that says, Mark, I know exactly the person you're talking about, and I know the destruction that this person did. I can think of off the top of my head at least half a dozen really good people at Verizon that either resigned or were riffed because of that person. This person completely destroyed the momentum of what we were doing, completely went against these credo things that we talk about with that Verizon should do. And in fact, had a number of conversations with me undermining the senior leader that happened to be a female that I brought to her attention several times, and she chose to gaslight me.
Wow. I could see, you don't have to go into a lot more detail. I can see where that would sour you immediately. Not only that, I mean, you were surrounded by incompetent management. And when you're surrounded by incompetent management and you can plainly see the mistakes that are being made based on your own experiences and your career, right, you have to turn around and say to yourself, well, if it's not going to get any better, it's time for me to go. And I'm assuming that that's the kind of the point you reached.
That was exactly it. I'm like, this is not tenable for either one of us anymore. So that's what transpired. Now, Bruce, I do want to be sensitive to our time because I know you have an hour, and no surprise, we've cranked through almost an hour of discussion. But I really wanted to make as much of this about you and your experience, but I want to make sure if there's any other questions that you have. And then,
Mark, I don't know if it's a question as much as I'd like to make kind of a statement. I have to tell you that during one's career, and my career spans 40 plus years, okay, and I know that you are in a similar situation, you meet and work with so many different people. I can think back of all of the people that I've worked with in a myriad of different companies that I had been with through my 40 plus years career. And what I'm pleased about, okay, is the fact that there is only a small group of people that I have been able to maintain a relationship with over the years. Because the one thing, you had asked me a question before, what are some of the things you miss? Because at the end of the day, a job is not a job. It's just a name. Okay. It's a Verizon. It's an AT&T. It's an IBM. It's an Oracle, whatever. What makes a company are the people. And, you have great relationships with people while you're working. And the one thing that I found, which was probably most insightful, is that when you leave a job, and I've left several over my career, you always say to people, we'll stay in touch. Let's stay in touch. Let's continue to communicate. And the one thing that's most disappointing is that you'll try and you find out that the common denominator is the job, because those are the things that you always talk about. And unless you make a concerted effort to develop a relationship that takes into consideration personal relationships, personal triumphs, personal conversations, personal discussions, whether it be political, family related, or what have you, okay, you don't transcend the job and you lose so many relationships. You asked before, what's your sense of loss? That's my sense of loss. So what I want to say to you, Mark, is number one, I appreciate you including me in your journey. Thank you. More importantly, I appreciate you and your friendship, because you are one of the few individuals. And again, I can count those individuals on the fingers of one hand of how many people of the people that I still communicate with, because they are willing to make the same effort that I am. And it's not just verbiage. It's not just, yeah, we're going to stay in touch. One thing that touched a nerve with me, you just said you spoke with Bill Lenahan. I haven't spoken with Bill for over 2 years, but I'll tell you right now, as soon as I get off this call, you know who I'm going to reach out to? I'm going to reach out to Bill Lenahan. Simply based on the fact that you mentioned that he misses you. He wants to know how you're doing. Those are the type of relationships, if you put those together, and like your relationship and my relationship, where there's willingness to want to continue to be friends, and you're willing to put in the effort, that, my friend, is worth all the tea in China, as the saying goes.
I agree. And I was reflecting on my time at Verizon, and my most enjoyable, I had probably 2 sets of most enjoyable times. My first was working on Bill's team, because I think who he put together, Bill really knew how to put together the right individuals. And between yourself and me and a couple others on that team, most of that team were really great, collaborative, supportive folks. And I really enjoyed that. And then that early part of me being able to build something at Verizon was great. So I appreciate your friendship tremendously. And by the way, I echo exactly what you say. And what's interesting to me is that and I don't know if you felt this way, but there were people that I thought when I left, I would have maintained a relationship with, that I didn't. And there are people that I would have never guessed in a million years would have been the ones that were supportive, that actually flipped the script in my mind on who were my true long-term friends and relationships. You never wavered. You were always in that category, but I have to say, when I left Verizon and when I left other roles, there were people that surprised me in both ways.
It's funny you say that. I felt much of the same. People that I thought I would have stayed in touch with just evaporated. They went into the ether. They're gone. And there are those people that I never in a million years thought that I would maintain a relationship. They're putting in the effort. Bruce, how are you doing? Tell me about retirement. I get phone calls from, I don't know if you remember Wes Withrow, okay, but Wes was one of our engineers, one of our top engineers. I still talk to him. He sends me pictures when he goes alligator hunting, okay? Sonia Heffernan, she's another one. She's moved into 2 different companies. She still calls me and we talk not often, but often enough where she uses me as her sounding board. I love that. I love the opportunity. Again, like I've said through our discussion, I love the opportunity to take all that's in here or as much of it as you want to absorb and give it out. Benefit by what I've experienced. Let me help you. And that's what I do with Sonia. And you know what? Getting back to the statement we made, Mark, you are a friend to a large degree as well. You are a mentor, okay? Because I like to follow the steps that you're taking. I love the fact of your motorcycle trips and your detailing what you're experiencing along with the people that you're running into. I love it. And you know what? You're one of the people that I use as a guiding light in terms of redeveloping yourself and reinventing yourself at a time where the world is crazy. There's a tremendous retirement tsunami that's going on. And you, my friend, have found a way to kind of rise above the fray and stick your neck out and say, hey, here's who I am. If you like me, great. If you don't like me, that's okay too. Here's some content to go by. I love it, Mark. And I really do treasure our friendship.
Me as well. And with that, Bruce, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you for an hour of exactly what I was expecting, and which was tremendous discussion and an insight. And I'm going to leave here a better person. And there's no doubt your insights have made me better and is going to leave our world in a better place. And I wish you tremendous success. I'll make sure you're the first recipient once this podcast is good to go. And I wish you grace and peace, my friend.
Thank you. And thanks again for everything.
Talk to you soon, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Mark My Words. If this conversation moved you, challenged you, or helped you to see something differently, send it to someone you care about. You can find all my work, full episodes, and coaching info at linktree/Mark Bulander. That's linktr.ee/MarcBulandr. And as always, grace and peace.